This is one of the world's most beautiful yet unpredictable environments. And it was where I was about to try and run my first ever marathon.
Could you just tell my wife and mother they were absolutely right? This was a really stupid idea.
The question why we run had months previously been my starting point. In the weeks that followed, I'd sought inspiration from some of the world's best distance runners.
We all want to feel like we are flying. That is a dream of every runner.
Asked whether running is something we were born to do.
Our ancestors were all runners. Humans who were not good at running were left essentially in the evolutionary dust.
And endured a less than convincing start to my own road running career.
There's a 65-year-old man, a 50-year-old woman, and a 12-year-old boy that have all run faster than me.
Now I was in the Antarctic. Starting one of the world's most unlikely marathons was easy enough. Trying to finish it, well, that would prove to be rather more complicated.
Goggles down, they're frozen up, you can't see where you're going. Goggles up, your eyes start to freeze shut.
I live in the Middle East, in Qatar, where I work as a sports journalist. I run like many people do, to stay fit and steer clear of my inbox for an hour or two every week. My job has taken me to sporting events all over the world, but few can match a trip I made in 2008, when I went to the North Pole to film a marathon.
Unbelievably cold, but it's a laugh as well.
It was an experience that inspired me to think I might one day want to do something similar and not just stand around with a microphone.
I've absolutely no idea just how bloody cold this is.
That's me there in the nice warm coat.
So I guess to get rid of my feelings of worthlessness, I'm now getting ready to run a marathon, my first, not in the Arctic near the North Pole, but in the Antarctic near the South Pole.
My older brother Graham is the one member of my family who's actually run a marathon. His ultimately successful trip to the finish line started with a health checkup.
The doctor said, yeah, you're okay, but your cholesterol is quite high. Better watch your blood pressure, and have you thought about losing some weight? So came out of the doctors reasonably depressed and thought, I need to do something about it.
Were you having a midlife crisis?
What you mean, the fact that, okay, I have got a sports car, it is convertible, I have got a tattoo, and my fiancée is 12 years younger than me, and I topped it off by running a marathon. So yeah, that's one way of looking at it, I suppose, but I think it's quite lazy journalism, to be honest.
Time then to up my journalistic and running game. I'm embarking on the biggest physical challenge of my life. Along the way, I'm going to ask why running in all its forms is the sport so many of us choose to do. Kenya has produced 4 of the 5 fastest ever marathon runners. The perfect place to step up training for my first.
In so many cities and cultures, running is something that's squeezed in around the rest of people's lives and that at an elite level really struggles for attention. Well, there's no danger of that here in the Kenyan town of Eton. Running here taken very seriously, and those that choose to run do so with utter dedication.
In this country of running champions, Iten has become an unofficial capital. Some born here, others drawn here by the promise of training with the best. I want to know why, when I watch a marathon on TV, more often than not, it's a Kenyan out in front.
I can't imagine a day without running. I hear people are addicted to coffee or something, but for me, I'm addicted to running. No running, no start of the day. I knew if I train hard, I will win easy. So that was my motivation, like train hard, and then the competition is just having fun.
But what gives you power, the courage and faith that you can really do something in a race is how you have really trained. Whenever I'm in a race, knowing that my training was very good, you find that no matter how hard it is, I always keep on pushing, knowing that I can do it.
Iten is a town where that can-do attitude has taken root. At the local school, a tree is planted every time one of their former students wins a major running title. Over the years, the school grounds have been turned into something of a forest.
Well, I think what this tree-based tribute to success tells you is that, unlike what I was taught at school, it really isn't the taking part that counts. In Kenya, it's all about the winning.
I don't think there's any Kenyan who runs for fun.
This Irishman is uniquely placed to start telling an Englishman why the sort of leisure running I do has little place here in Kenya. Colin O'Connell arrived in Iten in the 1970s to work as a teacher and set up the town's first organised training programme. He's since guided a handful of athletes to the very top, including Olympic 800-metre champion David Rudisha.
The idea of running to school, running to the market, running to town, running to a neighbour's house, you know, it's in the rural areas, it's part of your lifestyle. It is something that you've internalised from the time you can walk.
In school, I was very active, and whenever I go for lunch, which is about a kilometer, I used to run to home. When I'm coming back to school, run. I didn't have an idea what I was doing, but I was training without knowing.
Running for me was a way of transport, coming from one side to another one. And it makes you reach there quicker. You have to go to school every morning. Sometimes you are late. You must run because you need to catch up with your classes.
An Olympic legend from my own country helps put into context just what sort of a head start this might give a Kenyan runner.
In the West, life has become very much easier physically for most people.
Seb Coe certainly doesn't take things easy. He was chairman of the London 2012 Olympic Organising Committee. As a runner, he won 2 Olympic golds and set 12 world records.
1:46 the world record, and it has been shattered.
He held the 800-metre world record for 18 years.
I came from a different setup, and I ran as quickly as my contemporaries from Africa were running at the time. In my country, UK, young people, when they get to the age of 15, on balance, are about 50% less fit than they were, or less active than they were when they were 9. Children that once walked to school or rode bikes to school or sometimes even ran to school like I did don't do that, and for all sorts of reasons. And that's a pattern that certainly in advanced countries is not unusual.
Being active from a young age undoubtedly contributes to Kenya's running culture. Others have argued Kenyans might have the perfect DNA to run, or that the thin air of high altitude, as there is here in Iten, helps condition the body for distance running. But simple economics rather than complex science could also explain a lot.
So as you say, Edwin, life without money is tough, and that's why people run.
For sure. Like me now, I have nothing. My dream is I run well, so that maybe I get money to support myself. You know, life without money, Even now, maybe I'm coming from training and I don't know what am I going to eat in the house because nothing to, I don't know. Maybe even I can only take water and sleep.
I think the motivation for a casual runner can always be quite an interesting one. When you find yourself out in the middle of nowhere with just a cameraman and some disinterested livestock to keep you company and the run is hurting, well, why shouldn't I just stop? And what you very quickly learn here is that the local runners just don't have that luxury of choice to stop. If I stop, I can still go home, watch TV and get on with the rest of my life. If they choose to stop running, they may not have a decent home to go back to.
The kids around here see the more elite athletes, you know, owning property, building a big house, driving a big car, you know, doing better for their families. And that's a fantastic motivation because they see it largely as a career, you know, as a way of out of poverty, as you said.
We run to make a career. We don't run for fun. When you know that I have no other option in life or I don't have any other way out in career-wise, then you dedicate more in what you love doing.
Most of the motivation come from the people who have been there before them. They are living good lives and they're driving good cars.
Now you are an 800-meter runner. Can you beat David Rudisha?
That is something I can do. I'm training, is also training. I'm a man, is also a man. I'm training with champions. That is my assurance that one time I will be a champion.
My time talking to Edwin has really helped put my own challenge into context. I'll be running a marathon because I want to, not because I have to. Training can be arduous, and it's certainly time-consuming. But witnessing the levels of sacrifice and commitment here has convinced me that in order to be ready for the Antarctic, taking shortcuts just isn't an option.
Well, as disheartening as it may be, I have to accept that I'm not going to win any marathons or make any money from running, but I still want to run. And that's the question I still have to answer. Why do I and millions of other plodders still want to get on the road and run as best we can?
One place to find more than a few plodders doing the best they can is at the New York Marathon. My own race on ice is now a month away. Two more contrasting events it would be hard to imagine, but in common with the vast majority of the 50,000 runners here, I'll be running not to win, just to finish. The scale of this event and the level of effort on show is definitely sharpening my own focus. It looks frightening and inspiring in equal measure.
It's an unbelievable experience. I had the privilege to do Boston 3 years ago, but the amount of crowds and support just the entire way was unbelievable.
1 year ago, even when I went to the shops, I went in my car, sat on the couch, did nothing, and then I said to myself, New York, here I come. Now, me and my brother, we made it.
It's therapy, it's outdoors, it's my time, it's just wonderful. And you're with people when you do these races, it's just nothing like it.
Glenn Gear is a psychologist and an experienced runner who might just be able to explain why so many far from elite athletes like myself are driven to run a marathon.
When you look at marathon running, it's kind of like it takes recreational running and then it takes it a step beyond. So I think the psychological needs that marathon running fills for people in westernized societies now are completely beyond health. It's very much about showing someone I can do this. I can achieve something that everyone thinks is extraordinary. And once you realize that you can do that and you see that in yourself, you start to believe other things about yourself.
I can definitely buy into what Glenn is saying. I want to see how I'll respond to putting myself in harm's way. And I really won't know how I'm going to react to the distance, the race, or the cold until I'm actually there.
The idea of a marathon in the South Pole area, unbelievable. You know, I mean, it's like you've got two major adverse things bumping right up against each other. You know, a marathon, your first marathon experience to such an extreme climate, and interconnecting those together in that kind of experience, you know that you have few options, but if you run into that, I think you're just going to have to muscle through it.
Time, I think, to ask a medical professional if I can be assured my body won't crack up on the Antarctic ice.
Wow, that's that's a tough question. You know, I mean, I've never seen anybody, I've never met anybody who's preparing for a race like that.
When he's not laughing at me, Tak Fukunaga is a doctor who specialises in trying to keep runners on their feet.
I guess really listening to your body from the beginning to end, and seeing if anything is out of the ordinary when it comes to your joints, your bottom of your feet, your skin, you know, I think would be an important thing. And before anything gets worse as you're running, to stop and monitor and make sure everything is okay. You know, anybody who signs up for a marathon should be fully aware of the amount of training that should be involved and the kind of pain and aches and all kinds of negative things that are associated with running a marathon. People do need to understand that when they're picking up running as a sport, there is an inherent risk of injury that comes with it. And when they have a set target and they're so determined to get there that they try to either ignore or mask the pain or any signal that the body is giving them, that could be a cause for disaster.
Running barefoot probably won't be advisable in the Antarctic, but a sizable minority of runners believe taking your shoes off is the key to staying injury-free while you train. And at this point, I'm nothing if not open-minded.
When you're barefoot running, you take short strides.
Doug Joachim is a running coach who shuns traditional trainers.
So you're gonna stand here without looking. I'll set the metronome. One leg. So ready? Yeah. Don't look down, look up. Stay close to the line. And as you can see, you're all over the place here.
He says the shoes we think are protecting our joints could be doing quite the opposite.
So if you have a cushion this big on your heel, you're going to hit the ground harder. And moreover, because you have a cushion, you're wearing heels. As a guy, I tell guys this all the time, you're wearing a 1-inch to 2-inch heel, just like high heels. So that shortens your Achilles tendon. And over time, it adaptively shortens and it does not get longer. And which causes all sorts of other issues. Once you mess with your foot and your ankle, the mechanics there, it's going to mess with your knee mechanics and your hip mechanics.
Why barefoot? What's the point? Is there something for that reason?
Getting back to nature. People come up to me all the time and say, you know, isn't it dangerous to run in Central Park or anywhere for that matter, barefoot? And I'd say the opposite. It's safer. It allows me to feel the ground. It allows me to be more in touch with my surroundings, and I'm more aware, and I feel more comfortable when I'm running that way as well. Now I run pain-free, and I enjoy my runs a lot more than I used to.
Doug himself would agree the barefoot style isn't for everyone. I've stayed injury-free till now, and I have to say I'm not too happy to be feeling the ground beneath my feet quite so directly. A few days later, my trainers are safely back on, and I'm getting ready to spend an evening with New York's Orchard Street Runners. It's the sort of group that can now be found in many major cities. I'm hoping they can give me a final push in my pre-marathon preparations.
The group was originally started because I was trying to get a girl to run with me. And 2 years later, still going on. The girl's no longer in the picture, but the group is. The advantages right off the bat were just social interaction, like-minded individuals coming together for a run, created the dynamic that I think was more specific than going to a bar or going to a party. Most people are not working 9-to-5 jobs. They're in creative fields. They're living downtown. They're young.
I think what we might do actually is cut them off and then sprint to the finish on Orchard Street and win.
I set a different route every week to keep things interesting and to challenge people in different ways. And that dynamic is what makes it appeal to what I think is a different type of runner than the cliche.
Running by myself, I'm more likely to walk or slow down or not really push myself, but like running with other people. Not that you're being competitive, but you're like, okay, this person's not slowing down, this person's not stopping. Just stay with them, stay with them, stay with them.
When you're running side by side with somebody, you get to like feel that pace with them. You're running the same route. I think there's something more social about it than a lot of people recognize, even if you're not speaking with them the whole way through.
I used to be a competitive runner, now live the New York lifestyle out most nights, and wanted to stay fit and wanted something that was, convenient, but cool people that weren't just about running. And this is just, it fits my lifestyle perfectly.
The group's approach to post-race refueling is definitely appealing.
The best part of running is drinking beer after. That's why you do it.
Definitely. Makes the legs feel better.
But too much time spent in a bar in New York's Lower East Side probably won't help come the start of the world's southernmost marathon. That's now just 2 weeks away. It's time to try and get race ready. I've come to Florida to run in my first ever organised half marathon.
All right, folks, welcome to the Key Largo Bridge Run. We are going to make our way to the start line. Oh, sing us that star-spangled banner it wave.
We have a runner here today, I believe from England. He is running here today. And in a very short time, he will be running in, get this, Antarctica. Who wants to swap with him? Nobody. Anyway, we also wish him all the luck in the world.
I'm about to start finding out if weeks of training have actually paid off.
We have 30 seconds, guys. 3-0, 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 2, 1, let's go!
This Florida Run is a small-scale community event where the emphasis for those running either a short distance or the 21-kilometer half marathon like me is on fun. But I'm also building up to the rather more serious business of my first full marathon, which will be in the Antarctic. A huge undertaking as far as I'm concerned, but some would argue it's the sort of thing humans were born to do, that distance running was key to our ancestors' survival, when our feet were our only means of transport.
Everyone was a runner. Humans who were not good at running were left essentially in the evolutionary dust. Hunting was a very basic aspect of what our ancestors did, and you have to run to get the game. And long-distance running abilities are particularly effective at going for a long time so that you can get the game and you can eventually wear the animals down.
You'll need a wide angle right here.
We have the luxury of not exercising, of working very little for food, of eating things that are high fat and high sugar in abundance. And I think that's very evolutionarily unnatural.
Good job, ladies. Good job out there.
The way that I feel after an intense run is proof positive that that's something that we're engineered mentally and physically to do. There's no other way to get that feeling that I've experienced but something about running taps into something so deep. It's the hunting and gathering days when you're in a pack hunting a wild animal. I feel like this is a similar experience.
My less than agile form does make me wonder just how useful I'd have been to my tribe. But I do at least make it to the finish line here.
Andrew Richardson, good run, Andrew.
Well, you know what, apart from the fact that half of that run seemed to be uphill, it was actually quite enjoyable. I guess all I've got to do now is twice the distance in a howling wind and in the freezing cold, so that should be easy. That's a nice surprise.
My parents, who are on holiday nearby, don't do a great job of further boosting my confidence levels.
I think he's completely mad, but I'm told there's plenty of facilities there for you, so you can collapse any time.
It is only a film. It is only a marathon. You can stop and give up at any time. It's not worth killing yourself off or your life. Okay?
A mother's melodrama aside, my parents' concerns do look to have some statistical backing.
So, top of my age group, so I kind of got to be happy with that until you realise there's a 65-year-old man, a 50-year-old woman, and a 12-year-old boy that have all run faster than me, so still a bit of work to do.
A run like this, though, is really all about enjoying yourself.
We got a race to the finish, photo finish by a nose.
But not all races are, as I'm about to find out. This is Chile's Atakama Desert, my final stop before the Antarctic. A tougher place to run would be hard to find. It's the driest hot desert on Earth. It's also at altitude, so there's limited oxygen in the air. Not, one would think, the obvious location for a marathon. The guiding hand behind this expedition and the upcoming Antarctic Ice Marathon is runner Richard Donovan. In 2012, he managed to get to and run a marathon on each of the world's 7 continents in less than 5 days. Now he's organising a marathon on a volcano.
It's kind of counterintuitive, really, in some ways, you know. Bring people up to altitude where they're going to be gasping for oxygen at, almost 15,000 feet. Throw in volcanoes. One of them is an active volcano. And I just think that makes it attractive to people.
It's such apparent lapses in human logic that make running fertile ground for philosopher and runner Mark Rowlands.
There's a guy called Bernard Suits, a Canadian philosopher, who asked this question, if suppose you could live in a utopia where everything that you could get through work, you could now acquire through the push of a button. What would you do? How would you spend your time in utopia? And his answer, and I think he's right, is that we would find ways of making things difficult for ourselves. You have this goal, and there are various ways of achieving it, and we choose a less than maximally efficient way. We choose a difficult way of achieving it just so we can play the game.
This volcano marathon is a case in point. An altitude of 4,500 meters looms over the start line. That's not far off the height of Everest Base Camp. This event is less than a week before my Antarctic race, so I'm aiming to complete 3/4 of the course.
2, 1.
I'm hoping this race will provide a tough final test in extreme conditions. It's rapidly apparent the most brutal few hours of my running life so far lie ahead of me. A shortage of oxygen, an oversupply of sun, sand and uphill climbs. These are conditions that force everyone taking part to dig very deep. I'm struggling to breathe, struggling with the terrain. The urge to stop increases with every stride.
You decide. You decide whether you can go on, whether you can do this, whether you can't do it.
Jonathan Katz is a man who knows how I'm feeling. He's a psychologist who also enjoys running not just marathons, but 80-kilometer ultra-marathons.
I think challenging yourself, it has a very rewarding quality. I think there's a feeling of being alive, of pushing yourself, of constantly seeing what you can do. That really gets you aware of your own kind of mental and physical being when you push yourself to extreme ways. That I think it's very hard to get that in other parts of your life.
The internal discussion taking place in my head sees my mind, for whatever reason, ignoring the screaming appeals of my body. I carry on and do eventually hit the 30-kilometer target I'm aiming for.
When you look at a marathon runner's mentality, it's kind of like, why are you doing this? You know this is painful. You know you might even get injured. You know running a little bit is healthy and running too much may or may not be. So it really points to this question of, what exactly is the mechanism by which people are going to continue doing something in spite of the pain? I think what it largely is that when you do that, when you're in pain, when you're experiencing adversity and you carry on through it, it's such a great signal to yourself of success.
Come on, Ivan. First Irish grace. Yes.
All motivation must come from yourself, and where you find it is another question. Sometimes you don't know till you're in the middle of the event. It can be different from one event to another.
Oh, Jesus.
In locations such as these, you actually enjoy the run while you're suffering. And I think I must have the most envious career in the world at the moment, in that I watch people suffering during events, and at the end of every one, they thank me for it.
This is the hardest marathon I've ever done, and it's probably the best because of that.
People talk about, that's the toughest race I ever did, and that's the toughest thing I've ever done. That was the toughest thing I've ever done, without a doubt. It was hell.
This run was painful enough. I'm now about to take on a full marathon in possibly even harsher conditions. Punta Arenas on the southern tip of Chile is my jump-off point for the Antarctic. A final briefing before we fly provides a worrying warning of the freezing temperatures that await us.
What really shuts down first is the fingers and toes, and you tend to get a bit around the groin of frostbite. So it might be worth putting an extra bit of a sock down there or some sort of padding.
As good a motivation as any to double-check I have packed the right kit.
So a lot of people have asked me exactly what it is I'm going to be wearing to run this silly race in the Antarctic. On your feet, it's basically a pretty regular pair of running shoes. Extra grip on the bottom, they're fairly waterproof. Couple of layers of thick socks, hopefully that will be enough. On the body, it's just lots of thin layers and then a windproof outer shell. Pretty cool piece of kit over here. This is obviously a face mask. Hopefully that will protect you from the cold wind, but also allow you to breathe through these vents here. And then the most important thing, the Antarctic beard.
Road testing some of that equipment is a practical step in my final preparations. But just as important is the need to get mentally ready. And possibly the greatest appeal running has for me is its ability to relax and focus my mind.
It's amazing how many times you can have, 3 or 4 things that you think are problems rolling around in your head, and at the end of a run, that everything actually becomes much clearer. It was a very important part of my life while we were preparing to deliver an Olympic Games.
We call it autopilot. When your intensity and the longevity of the run has hit a certain point, there's something about the act of running that it's almost hypnotizing, and it allows me to change my perspective on thoughts and ideas that I may have, and it gives me an ability to meditate on these things in a much calmer, clearer way.
I've had plenty of time to meditate on what's heading my way. This upcoming run into the unknown has both concerned and captivated me. But after 6 months of training, I feel I'm as ready as I'll ever be to take it on. It's a 4.5-hour flight from Punta Arenas to the Antarctic camp. I and more than 50 other runners from 21 different countries are about to find out exactly what it is we've let ourselves in for.
You wouldn't normally recommend that somebody get in an environment where they haven't really trained for it properly, right? It's not a setup for failure, but it presents a problematic level. You have to really be committed to not allowing yourself to go to the dark side. You have to come to peace with the fact that there are going to be so many unknowns. So you have to really open yourself up to the fact that you're going to experience many things that you can't even anticipate. You don't want that piece to overwhelm you and blindside you. So you have to prepare yourself for the feeling of starting to get overwhelmed.
Not much can prepare you for the feeling of stepping into nature's deep freeze. The lowest temperature ever recorded on Earth, minus 93 degrees Celsius, was on this continent. Winds can hit 300 kilometers per hour. But for now, conditions around the tents we're staying in are relatively calm.
So this is Union Glacier Camp, which will be our home for the next few days, and it's around here that I'll be running this marathon. The South Pole, that is about 1,000 kilometers in that direction. We're in a place so remote, even the penguins don't bother coming to visit. Surrounding us on all sides are the Ellsworth Mountains. That's the highest mountain range in the Antarctic. Should hopefully provide us with some protection from the high winds that can blow through here. But I have to say, at the moment, the weather is being really kind to us. And with all these layers on, I'm actually feeling quite warm.
Everyone is making the most of this weather window, knowing it's unlikely to last too long.
This is going to be something extreme. Like, I've done lots of marathons and I can already feel this is going to be the hardest one ever. So I'll just be happy to finish.
My first marathon I didn't train for, so that was a whole different type of tough, but I don't think there'll be any comparison. Just the terrain, the cold, the wind. I think it'll be draining, but it'll be awesome when we finish and know what we just did.
Next morning brings race day and some proper Antarctic weather. The temperature is dropping, and so too are my confidence levels.
Last night was absolutely Baltic. My tent mate, his sleeping bag's not quite big enough to cover his head, and his head actually froze to the camp bed. It's about minus 20 now, and the clouds are coming in.
You know, you're going into a marathon in an unusual location. So it's not just a conventional road marathon, you're attempting a marathon where other factors are going to come into play, and that's the terrain and the environment you're running in. So you're actually doubling the effort involved in many respects. I guess the advice I would give is to approach it like an ultra-marathon, which is a distance longer than a marathon. And very often the way people approach them is to go off very slow, because it's about managing your resources. And if you think you're going just slow, go slower still.
The best advice I would give you is focus on the step in front of you, and that's it. There's really nothing else I could tell you. You have a tough task ahead of you in those conditions especially.
3, 2, 1.
After months of training and imagining what this race would be like, reality is now well and truly biting. The draining effect of the underfoot snow and ice is immediate. The strength is being pulled out of my body with every pace.
One step is quite firm, and then the next step you feel like you're falling down a crevasse, so that's quite difficult. And it's kind of catch-22 with your eyes. Goggles down, they're frozen up, you can't see where you're going. Goggles up, your eyes start to freeze shut. So yeah, one or two difficulties. I'm starting to wonder whether or not a training run in the desert was absolutely ideal preparation.
In between the kilometers spent squinting through frozen goggles, I have to remember to take whatever chances I can to briefly defrost.
That's really hot. Put some snow in it.
We know that in a lot of winter sports, hockey and other things, people sweat a lot, but because they don't feel hot or they don't feel as tired as they do in hot weather, they might not feel the need to drink water. But I think that's when you need to be conscious about drinking water on a regular schedule.
Be it a lack of fluids in my system or too much ice in my eyes, it's not too long before I start to get somewhat confused. Where are we? Halfway? We're halfway. I kind of popped my groin after about 8 miles, which isn't great. So that's causing the odd wave of nausea to sweep through the body, which is delightful, but that's kind of okay. You expect that. But in the brief moments when my eyes aren't soldered together, it's so beautiful. The landscape is so stunning. It's just an inspiration. You've just got to keep going. As my physical state declines, I have to fight to stay mentally positive. Running, I try to remind myself, normally makes me feel good. And I have, after all, chosen to be here. After 5 hours and 35 kilometers, though, any sense of enjoyment has well and truly passed. It's minus 25 degrees Celsius, and there's ice growing out of my chin. I'm immersed in the sort of mental and physical conflict that consumes most marathon runners at some point. Every step is hurting and giving me plenty of reasons to stop. But that same step is also taking me closer to the finish.
If you push yourself in a marathon under any conditions, there are going to be points where there's nothing more that you want to do than to stop. When those thoughts happen, it doesn't mean there's a problem. It just means that this is taxing, and it's easier to think about ways of freeing yourself from that, which ultimately is just stopping and sitting on the ground. But if the goal is to continue, then you really need to give those very little thought and move back to what's going to propel you to complete the race. You can't be a little pregnant here. It's either you finish or you don't.
A friend of mine said this to me during marathon training last year, and I was going to give up at mile 17 during a training run. And the way he put it just, for some reason, made logical sense, and that was all I needed. He said to me, the decision to finish was made when you started running, and that's it. There's no other acceptable outcome but to finish this run.
It may not have been stylish or quick, but after 6 hours and 21 minutes of forward motion, the finish line does at last agree to cooperate with my efforts.
You did it.
Well stuff.
Well done.
Thank you.
And that's what you get at the end of it.
That makes it all worthwhile. Thank you, Richard. I mean, this race has been like a dot on the horizon for so long, and to actually just be in the Antarctic is quite surreal, and to have actually finished the marathon, I can't quite believe it. Huge sense of relief, fair amount of pain, but just an overwhelming feeling of satisfaction. Be it the race to hit the finish line in first.
I've done, I don't know, maybe 160 marathons in my life, but nothing so beautiful.
Or the race against yourself just to finish.
I will never do it again.
Running has revealed itself to be that rarest of sports, where the rules are yours to write.
For me, a runner is a runner. If you are elite or if you are recreational, you are a runner. I think human being in general is very competitive. You finish this 5K, you want to go to 10K. You finish half marathon, you want to go to marathon. We all want to feel like we are flying. That is a dream of every runner.
You can't play a certain level of tennis if you don't have a certain skill set. But you can run a marathon, maybe very slow, but you're willing to put the time and energy, you can complete it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
There's very few things in the world that you kind of own in that kind of way.
It's very difficult to find a sort of time in your life for things you do for their own sake and not for the sake of something else. I think running has become that for many people. A little corner of your lives where you can say, right, now I'm going to do this just because I want to do it and for no other reason. There isn't anything else you'd rather be doing. Those sort of moments reveal the kind of value that it has.
Running gives you an opportunity to be zen-like. It's a form of meditation very often because you can become so physically tired that you don't even have energy for thoughts at some point, and everything empties out of your head except what matters, and that's where you have your epiphany.
I don't think I ever got runner's high, so to speak, until I broke 8 miles. After that, it was done. I was never going to stop. Before that, running was a task. Now the task is waiting for the next run. Yeah! Constantly searching for that high again. That feeling of euphoria is real, and it has amazing effects on the quality of life. It's something that everybody should try. They should try it too, where they get to that point where they experience that, because anybody that doesn't is really missing out on something that is right there for the taking.
What I hadn't expected was this marathon becoming about so much more than getting fit. That running would get under my skin so completely. That training for it and finishing it would push my body, but more importantly, take my mind to places it had never been before.
Now, initially, when I finished this run, I was happy just to have come through it in one piece. But very quickly, a sense of restlessness set in, almost depression, as I started to question what I'd just done.
Could I have run better? Should I have trained harder? Would I be faster in the future? I realised then, as many others have before me, finishing a race is rarely the end. More often, it's just a detour on the way to the next one.